He grew up in a small house made of weak walls and tired wood. When it rained, water slipped in through the roof and fell into old plastic bowls placed carefully on the floor. The house was never quiet. There was always the sound of coughing, footsteps, or the wind shaking the loose window frame. It was not a place of comfort, but it was the only home he had ever known. From a young age, he understood what it meant to have little. Breakfast was often skipped, and dinner was shared in silence. Each person pretending they were full so someone else could eat more. His parents worked hard, harder than most people he knew, yet it never seemed enough. His father left early every morning and returned late, hands rough and back bent. His mother took small jobs whenever she could. Her eyes always tired but kind. He watched other children walk to school with clean clothes and full lunch boxes. He noticed how their shoes looked new, while his had holes covered with tape. Teachers spoke about dreams and futures, but those words felt distant to him. Dreaming seemed dangerous when reality was already so heavy. Still, something inside him refused to accept that this life was all there was. As he grew older, that feeling turned into restlessness. He wanted more than broken furniture and unpaid bills. He wanted to breathe without feeling trapped. He loved his family, but poverty slowly turned that love into frustration. Every time his parents argued about money, every time he saw his mother cry quietly at night, something hardened inside him. He began to believe that his family was holding him back, not because they wanted to, but because their struggles had no end. He told himself that staying meant becoming the same, tired, poor, invisible. The thought scared him more than leaving ever could. When he finished school, opportunities were limited. There were no connections, no savings, no safety net. Still, he searched for a way out. He spent nights imagining a different life, one where he didn't have to count every coin. He pictured tall buildings, busy streets, and a version of himself who was not ashamed of where he came from. One day a chance appeared. It wasn't a big opportunity, just a small job in the city through someone he barely knew. The pay was low and the work was uncertain, but to him, it looked like freedom. It looked like escape. He didn't sleep that night. His mind was full of hope and fear fighting each other. Telling his family was the hardest part. His father listened quietly, nodding slowly, as if he had expected this moment. His mother tried to smile, but her hands trembled. She asked simple questions: where he would stay, how he would eat, when he would come back. He answered quickly, avoiding her eyes. Deep down, he didn't know the answers. No one stopped him. No one begged him to stay. That hurt more than if they had. Their silence felt like acceptance, or maybe understanding. His parents had given everything they had already. They had no strength left to argue. On the morning he left, the sky was dull and gray. He packed his few clothes into a small bag. The house felt smaller than ever, as if it knew he was leaving. His mother pressed some money into his hand, money he knew she couldn't spare. He tried to refuse, but she insisted. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. He stepped outside without looking back for too long. If he had stayed, he might have changed his mind. As he walked away, his heart beat fast, not with joy, but with relief mixed with guilt. He told himself this was necessary. He told himself he would come back once he succeeded. The bus ride to the city felt endless. Buildings slowly replaced empty roads. The air smelled different. Everything looked bigger, louder, faster. He felt small, but also alive. For the first time, his future felt like something he could shape with his own hands. In the days that followed, reality hit hard. The city was not kind to dreamers. The job was exhausting. The room he shared was crowded, and food was still a problem. Yet, even in discomfort, he felt proud. He was surviving on his own. At first, he planned to stay in touch with his family. He meant to call to send money once he earned enough. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life moved fast. Every call reminded him of where he came from, and instead of comfort, it brought shame. He began to avoid those reminders. Slowly, he stopped calling altogether. Not because he didn't care, but because caring hurt too much. He told himself he needed to focus. He told himself distance was part of growth. Each excuse made it easier to stay silent. Years later, he would realize that this silence was the first true step away from his family. At that moment, though, he believed he was doing the right thing. He believed leaving was the only way to survive, as he stood among strangers. Chasing a future he barely understood, he didn't know the cost of his choice. He didn't know that one day a single meeting would force him to face everything he had tried. So hard to forget, life in the city was nothing like he had imagined. The streets were crowded, the noise never stopped, and the air smelled different every day. People walked past each other without noticing, lost in their own worlds. He felt invisible, and yet, strangely, free. Every morning he woke up before the sun, prepared for a day full of work, and went to bed exhausted. Dreaming of something better, his first job was tough. He worked long hours, sometimes without a proper break. The work was not what he had wanted, but it was honest, and it paid enough for food and a small shared room. He learned quickly that the city respected no one who hesitated. People were competitive, and every small mistake could cost him. He made errors, yes, but he also learned faster than most. Each day he reminded himself why he had left home and why he could not fail. He missed his family at first. He remembered the smell of his mother's cooking, the sound of his father's slow footsteps, the way the walls of their old house creaked. Those memories made him ache. But every time he thought about reaching out, a voice inside warned him. He was supposed to succeed first. The city had no place for the weak, and he could not risk looking like he had failed. He told himself that if he became strong enough, he could return and help them all. That thought kept him moving. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly, he started to adapt. He learned the streets, the bus routes, the stores where the food was cheapest. He learned which employers were honest and which were not. He began to understand that survival was not just about working hard, it was about thinking smart. He saved every coin he could, always imagining the day he would finally have enough to live comfortably. Over time, people began to notice him. Colleagues respected his work ethic. He was quiet, focused, and reliable. In a place where most people gave up after a few failures, he persevered. Each small recognition boosted his confidence. He started to believe in himself in ways he never had before. But along with that belief came a new problem. The life he had left behind began to feel distant, almost unreal. Memories of home became something he only thought of at night. When the city was quiet and his room was dark, despite his growing success, he was lonely. The city was full of people, yet it was easy to feel isolated. Friends were scarce, and trust even rarer. He learned to keep his distance, to rely only on himself. At first, this was difficult. He missed conversations, laughter, and the small comfort of someone who truly knew him. But he adapted. He learned that independence came with a price, and he was willing to pay it. In the second year, he found a slightly better job. The pay was higher, the hours were long but manageable, and he met new people. He started to dress better, to carry himself with a quiet confidence. Each paycheck brought him closer to the life he had dreamed of. He began to enjoy small luxuries. A better meal, a clean pair of shoes, a book that cost more than he had ever spent before. These things felt like rewards for leaving everything behind, yet guilt never fully left him. Sometimes, late at night, he would picture his parents waiting for news, wondering if he was okay. He imagined the worry on his mother's face, the tiredness in his father's eyes. He told himself he would write a letter, send a small amount of money, but then days passed, and the letter never went. Excuses piled up. He was busy, he was tired, he would do it tomorrow. Tomorrow always came, and he did nothing. He became absorbed in the rhythm of city life. Opportunities kept coming, and each one seemed to demand more of him. He learned how to network, how to present himself, how to negotiate. Every skill he mastered was a step further away from the boy who had left home. He was changing, and he could feel it. The boy who had been quiet and unsure was becoming a man capable of surviving, even thriving in a harsh world. By the third year, he had saved a small amount, enough to rent a better room, and even send a little home once or twice. He chose to make it anonymous, not wanting his parents to feel that he was still struggling. He wanted them to think he had succeeded fully, that he had nothing to worry about. Pride and fear mixed together, forming a wall between him and the family he had left. He told himself it was temporary, that one day he would return and explain everything. For now, he needed to focus. People around him started to treat him differently. Employers offered more responsibilities. Colleagues sought his advice. Even strangers on the street seemed to notice a difference in the way he carried himself. Confidence brought attention, and attention brought opportunity. He worked harder than ever, sometimes until his hands were sore and his body ached. But each achievement felt like proof that leaving home had been the right choice. Even with success, he felt a growing emptiness. He realized that life was not only about money, work, and status. He had traded the warmth of family for the cold independence of the city. Friends he made were often temporary, colleagues who moved on as quickly as they arrived. He realized that he was living a life that others admired, but he admired it less himself. Deep down, he still longed for connection, for the familiar voices and faces of home. He began to dream again, but differently. Before, his dreams were about leaving, escaping, surviving. Now, his dreams were about something more: comfort, stability, and the chance to make a real difference. But there was always a shadow, the family he had left behind. Success felt hollow without them, yet he had no way to bridge the gap he had created. His pride would not let him admit weakness, and his fear of failure would not let him reach out. In this time, he learned a valuable lesson. Life is not just about survival, but also about choices and their consequences. Every day he felt the weight of the decisions he had made, and every night he wrestled with the knowledge that time moved on without waiting for him. The boy who had run away was gone, replaced by a man who understood the cost of leaving, yet continued to push forward, hoping that one day all the sacrifices would be worth it. By the 5th year, he was no longer the poor boy who had walked out of a small house full of worry and love. He had earned respect, stability, and some measure of comfort. He had become someone the city recognized and admired. Yet, every now and then, when the lights were dim and the streets were quiet, he would feel a tug in his heart, a reminder that the life he had left behind was not gone, only distant, and that one day it might call him back. By the 5th year, life had become a routine that he both depended on and resented. Each day was a cycle of work, small rewards, and loneliness. He had grown used to the city, to its noise, to its unending pace, but the sense of emptiness never went away. Despite the comfort he had earned, he could not escape the feeling that something important was missing. One morning, he left his apartment early, as usual, and walked along streets that were starting to feel familiar. He knew the rhythm of the city, the vendors setting up their stalls, early commuters rushing by, the distant sounds of construction blending with car horns. He walked with a purpose, yet his mind wandered. He thought about how far he had come and how much he had sacrificed. His thoughts drifted to his family, to the small house he had left behind, and to the faces he had not seen in years. That day, the city felt different. Maybe it was just his imagination, but the air seemed heavier and the crowds more pressing. As he waited at a busy intersection, his eyes caught sight of a familiar face. It was someone he had known from his childhood, someone who had stayed in the village while he had left. The sight froze him for a moment. His heart raced, and his mind went blank. He did not know how to react. The person was older, thinner, worn by life, but the eyes were the same. They recognized him immediately, and in that instant, all the memories he had tried to push aside came rushing back. The meeting was brief at first. They exchanged words, simple and awkward. He learned that the person had moved to the city a few years ago as well, trying to find work to support family left behind. They spoke cautiously, aware of the past and the silent gap of 5 years. In that conversation, he realized how much had changed, not only in the city, but inside himself. He was no longer the boy who had walked away. He was someone shaped by struggle, by work, and by survival. And yet, this person reminded him of who he had been, of what he had left behind. After that day, he could not stop thinking about the encounter. Memories of his family came back with a new intensity. He remembered the nights he had spent listening to the wind shake the walls of their small house, the way his mother's hands trembled as she cooked, the deep, quiet sadness in his father's eyes. He realized how much he had missed and how much he had avoided facing. The city had given him everything he thought he wanted, but it had also made him forget the people who mattered most. The meeting forced him to confront truths he had been avoiding. For the first time, he thought about the cost of leaving, not just the hardships he had escaped, but the suffering his absence may have caused. He wondered if his family had survived, how they had managed without him, and whether they had felt abandoned. These questions gnawed at him. They were uncomfortable, heavy, and impossible to ignore. In the weeks that followed, he'd found himself seeking out moments that reminded him of home. He visited markets where the smell of fresh bread reminded him of his mother's cooking. He walked through parks that reminded him of the small, dusty fields near his house. Every sight and sound brought both comfort and pain. He realized that no amount of success could replace the warmth of family and the sense of belonging that came with it. Work became both a refuge and a distraction. He buried himself in tasks, trying to ignore the pull of the past. Yet every achievement felt hollow. He had climbed higher, earned more, and gained respect, but he still felt incomplete. The encounter had cracked the shield of indifference he had built around his heart. It was no longer enough to survive. He needed connection, understanding, and reconciliation. He began to think about returning home. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. He feared rejection, anger, or disappointment. What if his family had moved on? Or what if the wounds of his absence were too deep to heal? And yet, the idea of staying away, of living with the regret of not trying, felt unbearable. He realized that life was demanding more than just survival. Now it demanded courage, honesty, and action. Every day he weighed his options. The city had given him a life he could be proud of, but it had also reminded him of everything he had left behind. His mind was full of what-ifs and maybes, and the uncertainty was heavy. He started to understand that the past cannot be ignored. That running away does not erase responsibility, and that true strength is measured not by what you achieve alone, but by how you face the consequences of your choices. He began to plan carefully. He thought about how he would approach his family, how he would explain the silence, and how he could offer what he had worked so hard to earn. He wanted to return with respect, humility, and the understanding that nothing could erase the pain his absence might have caused. The idea of reconciliation became his driving thought, something he focused on as he went about his daily life. During this time, he also reflected on his own growth. He realized that the person he had become was capable of compassion, patience, and understanding, even if he had spent years suppressing those qualities. He learned that success was not just measured in money or status, but in the ability to acknowledge mistakes and seek redemption. The city had taught him many lessons, but the encounter with someone from his past taught him the most valuable one: that connections, love, and family matter more than any achievement. As he prepared to take the next step, he felt a mix of fear, hope, and anticipation. The journey ahead would not be easy. Rebuilding relationships, facing the consequences of absence, and confronting the past would require courage unlike any he had needed before. And yet, he knew that this was the moment he had been unknowingly preparing for all these years. The city had shaped him, but the encounter had reminded him of what truly mattered. He spent days imagining the reunion. He pictured the house, the familiar streets, and the faces that had once been part of his daily life. Each detail brought a rush of emotion, regret, longing. He thought about how he would speak, how he would apologize, how he could show that his absence had never meant indifference. Every night, he fell asleep with these thoughts swirling in his mind, a mixture of fear and determination keeping him awake. Finally, the day came when he decided he could wait no longer. He packed lightly, carrying only what he needed, and set out for the place that had shaped him before the city did. As he traveled, he thought about the years he had spent running, surviving, and building a life. He reflected on the mistakes he had made, the opportunities he had taken, and the lessons he had learned. Each mile brought him closer to home, closer to facing the truths he had avoided for so long. He did not know how his family would react. He feared tears, anger, or silence. He feared that time had created a distance too wide to cross. But he also knew that he could not continue living with the weight of uncertainty. The meeting he had experienced years earlier had awakened something he could not ignore. It was a reminder that life is not just about escaping hardship, but about embracing responsibility and connection. He realized that some meetings change more than just a day. They change a life. And now, it was his turn to be changed by the life he had left behind. The closer he got to home, the faster his heart seemed to beat. Every mile brought a mix of fear, hope, and memories. The city behind him felt distant, a place of survival and achievement, but it had never given him what he truly needed. Now, he was returning to the home he had once left behind, uncertain of what awaited him. As he walked through the familiar streets, he noticed the subtle changes. The small shop near the corner had closed, replaced by a newer building. The road where he had played as a child was patched and cracked, but the smells and sounds brought back a flood of memories. The dusty fields where he had run were now partly overgrown, and the trees seemed taller, older. Everything had changed, yet everything felt the same. He paused outside his old house. The walls were weathered, the paint peeling, but it was unmistakably the place where he had grown up. He could see his mother moving inside, carrying groceries, and his father sitting near the window, his back still bent from years of work. Time had left its mark, but the familiar faces were exactly as he remembered. A mix of relief and fear washed over him. How would they react? Would they be angry, hurt, or welcoming? He knocked on the door softly, almost afraid to disturb the quiet. When it opened, his mother's eyes widened and her hands froze. Recognition came slowly, like a light flickering on. Then, as he stepped closer, her face broke into a mixture of tears and disbelief. His father's eyes, older and more tired, held a question he could not answer yet. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words, years of waiting, and the weight of absence. He spoke first, his voice trembling slightly. He apologized, words spilling out in a rush, for the years he had stayed away. For the silence, for the fear and pride that had kept him from reaching out. His parents listened, silent at first, absorbing the weight of his presence and words. Then, slowly, they responded, not with anger, but with understanding and relief. The years of worry and longing melted into a moment of reunion, fragile and powerful. He realized then that absence had not erased love. Despite the pain, the worry, and the time lost, the bond remained. His parents had waited, silently hoping he would return, and now he was there. Tears flowed freely, words stumbled, but the silence between them carried more meaning than anything spoken. Every hug, every touch, every glance was a reminder that home was not a place. It was the people who had never stopped caring. Over the following days, he listened more than he spoke. He wanted to understand what his family had endured in his absence. He learned about the struggles they had faced, the nights they had worried for him, and the small victories that kept them going. He realized how much strength they had shown, how resilient and courageous they had been despite the hardships. Their sacrifices were larger than anything he had achieved in the city. He began to share his story as well, the hardships he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the successes he had earned. He spoke carefully, aware that his words carried both pride and responsibility. He wanted them to understand that leaving had been a choice he had made for survival, not a rejection of love. Slowly, the walls of misunderstanding came down, replaced by trust, empathy, and shared understanding. In the evenings, they sat together, talking about life, dreams, and the years that had passed. The house, once filled with quiet struggles, now rang with laughter and conversation. He cooked small meals, helped with chores, and listened to stories he had missed. Every moment was a reminder that relationships, once damaged by absence, could be healed with time, patience, and honesty. He also began to help in practical ways. Money he had earned in the city was now shared carefully to improve their living conditions and make life easier. He fixed broken furniture, painted walls, and ensured that small comforts replaced some of the hardships they had endured. But more than material help, he realized that his presence, attention, care were the most important gifts he could give. As days turned into weeks, the initial tension and fear faded completely. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments together, rebuilding the connection that had been broken by time and distance. He noticed small details he had missed, the way his mother's hands moved when cooking, the sound of his father's voice telling old stories, the comfort of being able to sit in silence and still feel belonging. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The city, the struggle, the achievements, they had all shaped him, but they had not given him what truly mattered. Returning home, he realized that success was not about distance, status, or wealth. It was about connection, presence, and shared life. The meeting that had sparked this journey, the one unexpected encounter years ago, had changed everything. It reminded him that no matter how far he ran, the ties that truly matter remained strong, in quiet moments. He thought about the choices he had made and the lessons he had learned. He understood that leaving had been necessary for his growth, but returning was necessary for his soul. He had faced fear, pride, and guilt, and in doing so, he discovered the true meaning of forgiveness, reconciliation, and love. He now lived in a balance between two worlds, the city that had shaped his independence and resilience, and the home that reminded him of love, family, and roots. He had become a man who understood the value of both, who could appreciate achievement while honoring where he came from. And most importantly, he had learned that one meeting, one moment of recognition could change the course of a life, reminding him of what he had left behind and why it was never truly gone. Returning home was not the end of his journey, it was the beginning of a new chapter. The first days were filled with emotion, laughter, and tears. He discovered that the bonds broken by time and distance could be repaired, slowly and carefully. Every word spoken, every gesture of care, and every shared meal contributed to rebuilding trust. It was a process that required patience, humility, and courage. But he welcomed it fully. He spent hours listening to stories from the years he had missed. His parents spoke of challenges, small victories, and moments of quiet hope. They shared how they had carried on despite worry and loneliness, how they had maintained faith that he would one day return. Each story made him realize how much strength and resilience they had, and how his absence, while painful, had been met with grace rather than resentment. He also shared his experiences, carefully explaining why he had left, the struggles he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke of the city, the work, and the people who had shaped him. He explained the mistakes he had made and the growth that had come from them. His parents listened, not with judgment, but with a quiet understanding that only comes from unconditional love. In these exchanges, he felt the distance of 5 years shrink, placed by connection and understanding. Practical matters also needed attention. The small house had endured years of wear, and he wanted to give back in a tangible way. He fixed broken furniture, painted walls, and ensured that daily life was made easier. He used the savings he had earned to buy small comforts, new bed, clean sheets, better kitchen supplies. These were not luxuries, but symbols of care, a way to show that he had returned not only with words, but with action. More importantly, it was a way to show that he had grown into someone responsible and capable, ready to contribute to the life of the family he had once left behind. Yet, the most important changes were not material. His presence itself began to heal wounds that years of absence had caused. Mornings were no longer quiet. Meals were shared with conversation and laughter. Even simple routines like helping in the kitchen or walking together in the nearby fields became moments of connection. He realized that what he had longed for in the city's success, respect, independence, was nothing compared to the warmth and acceptance of being truly home. As time passed, he saw the transformation in himself. The fear, guilt, and pride that had driven his distance gradually faded. He learned to accept the past, to embrace it without being defined by it. The boy who had run away in search of freedom was now a man who understood the true meaning of responsibility and love. He realized that success is not measured by wealth or status, but but by the ability to face mistakes, nurture relationships, and create a life of purpose. He spent evenings reflecting on the journey. He thought about the city that had taught him resilience, the struggles that had shaped his character, and the family that had never stopped hoping. Every challenge he had faced, every hard-earned lesson, had led him back to the place he had left. He understood that leaving had been necessary for growth, but returning was essential for fulfillment. Life was about balance, independence and connection, achievement and love. He also began to think about the future. He wanted to ensure that his family would no longer face the hardships they had endured. He started small projects, helping with repairs, planning for steady income, and even looking into educational opportunities for younger relatives. He realized that his role was no longer only about himself. He could use the experience, skills, and resources he had gained to create stability and opportunity for those he cared about. The sense of purpose filled him with a new kind of satisfaction. Friendships and community ties also regained importance. He reached out to neighbors he had known as a child, reestablishing bonds that had frayed over the years. He shared stories of the city, listened to their experiences, and became an active part of the local life. It was a reminder that life is richer when shared, that belonging and contribution matter as much as individual achievement. Throughout this time, he never forgot the lesson of the unexpected encounter years ago, the meeting that had reminded him of home and the life he had left behind. It had changed his perspective, guided his choices, and ultimately brought him back. He realized that life often gives second chances, but only to those willing to face the truth, embrace responsibility, and act with courage. The encounter had set the stage for reconciliation and growth, proving that even brief moments can have a lasting impact. The most profound moments were quiet ones. Sitting together in the evening, listening to the wind, sharing simple meals, or watching the sunset, he felt a sense of peace he had never known in the city. Achievements, recognition, and independence were meaningful, but they could never replace these small human experiences. He learned that love, presence, and shared life were the most valuable parts of any success. As months passed, the house transformed not only physically, but emotionally. Laughter returned, conversations flowed, and the weight of absence was replaced by connection. He understood that reconciliation is not instantaneous, but requires consistent effort, empathy, and patience. And he was willing to put in that effort, where he had learned the cost of leaving and the power of returning. In his heart, he carried a deep gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons of the city, for the encounter that reminded him of what mattered, and most of all, for the family that had waited, hoped, and welcomed him back. He realized that life's true rewards are found not only in what we achieve for ourselves, but in the ways we heal, nurture, and connect with those we love. He often thought about the boy who had left home all those years ago. That boy had been scared, determined, and lonely. But now, as a man who had faced the consequences of his choices, he understood what it truly meant to grow, to change, and to return. Leaving had been part of the journey, but coming back, facing the past, and embracing love was where true growth and happiness began. The journey was not over, but it had taken a profound turn. He had learned that life is a combination of choices, courage, and connection. That success without love is hollow, that distance without reconciliation leaves lasting pain. And that one meeting, one decision, one return can transform a life completely. He had returned not just to a house, but to a life filled with meaning, hope, and belonging. And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Even after he had returned home and rebuilt the bond with his family, life continued to teach him lessons he had never expected. He realized that returning did not mean the struggles were over, nor did it mean that the past could be ignored. In fact, coming back brought new responsibilities, deeper understanding, the realization that growth is a lifelong process. He began to notice the subtle ways his absence had shaped not only himself, but also his family. As his parents had learned to survive without him, to rely on each other more deeply, and to adapt in ways he could not have imagined. They had developed resilience and patience, which were now evident in their daily lives. Seeing this, he felt a mix of pride and humility. He thought leaving would give him freedom, but he now understood that their strength had always been a quiet force he had underestimated. The family began to share their own dreams and hopes more openly. His mother spoke of small plans to improve their home, to start a little business, and to invest in the education of younger relatives. His father shared his desire to repair the fields and create a stable life for the family. He listened intently, understanding that his return did not mean he would take over, but rather that he would contribute support and stand beside them. He also took time to reflect on his own ambitions. The city had given him independence, skill, and a broader perspective, but he realized that these achievements were hollow without a sense of purpose. Now, purpose meant more than money or status. It meant nurturing relationships, contributing to the family, and using his experience to create a meaningful life. He began planning small projects, combining the skills he had acquired with the needs of his home, aiming to create a balance between personal growth and family well-being. One of the first steps he took was to help improve the house in ways that would bring long-term comfort. He repaired the roof, replaced broken furniture, and made the kitchen functional and safe. These were not grand gestures but thoughtful acts that showed he had returned with responsibility and care. As he worked alongside his parents, he noticed how much joy came from collaboration, from being part of a shared life rather than pursuing goals alone. He also reached out to the community. People remembered him from his childhood, and they were curious about the boy who had left and returned as a man. He shared stories of the city, of work, and of lessons learned. People listened with interest, and in turn, he learned about their lives, their struggles, and the ways they had adapted. He realized that everyone carries burdens, and that understanding and empathy can create bonds stronger than years of absence. In these interactions, he began to understand the importance of giving back beyond his own family. He helped neighbors with small tasks, offered guidance to younger people in the village, and used his experience to show that leaving or failing did not define a person. His presence became a source of encouragement, and he found fulfillment in helping others navigate challenges he had once faced himself. Despite all of this, he never forgot the feelings that had driven him away. He remembered the fear of being trapped, the frustration of poverty, and the desire to define himself independently. These memories reminded him of the boy he had once been and how far he had come. He shared these stories with his family, not as excuses, but as reflections. They listened, sometimes with surprise, sometimes with tears, and sometimes with quiet understanding. Through these conversations, they all began to see the full journey he had undertaken, the complexity of his choices, and the courage it took to come back. He also reflected on forgiveness, not only from his parents, but toward himself. Guilt had been a constant companion during his years in the city, a quiet voice that reminded him of his absence and the pain it had caused. Now he realized that true growth required acknowledging mistakes, taking responsibility, and forgiving himself. Forgiveness allowed him to move forward, to embrace the present, and to contribute positively to the lives of those he loved. The bond with his family deepened over time. They shared daily routines, laughter, and challenges. The home became a place of learning, support, and mutual respect. Each day, he observed how his parents continued to inspire him, how their patience and resilience guided his actions. He began to understand that family is not just a foundation, but also a mirror, reflecting values, strength, and love that cannot be found elsewhere. Through all of this, he also learned the importance of patience and humility. He realized that rebuilding trust and connection takes time, and that meaningful relationships are nurtured, not demanded. He approached each day with a sense of awareness and gratitude, understanding that actions, not words alone, rebuild bonds. This approach transformed not only his relationship with his family, but also his perspective on life. He began to plan for the future. With a sense of responsibility and vision, small improvements in the home, financial stability, and educational opportunities for younger relatives became goals that gave meaning to his life. He no longer measured success by independence alone, but by the positive impact he could have on those around him. He discovered that purpose and fulfillment come from contribution, empathy, and shared growth. As he continued to live and work alongside his family, He also found moments of quiet reflection. He walked through the fields, observing nature, thinking about the journey that had brought him back. He reflected on the lessons of the city, the challenges of separation, and the beauty of reconciliation. In these moments, he felt a deep sense of peace, understanding that life's value is measured not only by achievements, but by love, connection, and the courage to return. His story became a source of inspiration to others. Villagers and neighbors saw in him a man who had faced hardship, made difficult choices, and returned to embrace responsibility and love. His life demonstrated that mistakes do not define a person and that redemption is possible. When one faces the past with honesty and humility, through his actions, he showed that it is never too late to repair relationships and build a meaningful life in quiet evenings. As he sat with his parents, sharing stories, laughter, and plans for the future, he realized the true depth of what he had gained. The city had given him survival skills, independence, and resilience. But home had given him meaning, love, and belonging. Each day was a reminder that life's most valuable lessons are often learned through connection and shared experience. He often thought about the boy who had left home years ago, driven by fear and a desire for freedom. He understood that running away had been part of the journey necessary for growth, but it was the courage to return that had defined him as a man. He realized that life is not only about escaping hardship, but about facing it, taking responsibility, and embracing love. The journey of leaving and returning had shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. As months turned into years, his life settled into a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment. He continued to work with his family, contribute to the community, and nurture relationships. The lessons of patience, empathy, and courage remained central to his life. He understood that success is not measured by what one accumulates alone, but by the love, trust, and positive impact shared with others. Looking back, he saw the full journey with clarity. The struggles, the city, the years of absence, the moments of guilt, the encounter that had changed everything, and the return home, they all formed a path of growth. He realized that life's true rewards come from facing challenges, acknowledging mistakes, nurturing connections, and embracing the power of love and reconciliation. In the end, he had not only returned to a home, but had found himself purpose and the deepest kind of fulfillment.